You know, we Americans are a funny lot. We look across the Atlantic to a little island, place that's got some monarch, and we give this lady all kinds of attention, her and all of her family. You remember back in April of 2011, when Prince William and Kate Middleton were married, how so many of us Americans were glued to the TV set, watching the spectacle. Or maybe tuning in and catching the news about Prince Harry's latest misstep. Or even during the Olympics this summer, as the nations gathered in London, how much joy there was as we watched the Queen parachuting from a helicopter. Okay, well maybe it wasn't really the Queen, but it was fun anyway, wasn't it? Her and James Bond. You know, we have a funny relationship with the Queen. Because I don't think there's a single one of us, unless perhaps one of us has moved from England, who really wants to have a monarch. We did, in fact, have a war over that, 200 and change years ago. But there's still that mystique, that magic. We like kings and queens, even though as Americans we're not really sure what to do with them. We've grown up on stories, whether it's stories from Middle Earth or stories of the Arthurian legends. We watch movies with Helen Mirren. We shell out our hard-earned cash, but still not a one of us would really want to have a king or a queen. Okay, again, there's probably one exception somewhere. But as Americans, we're confused. My father, great guy, tells the story of when he was little, going on vacation in Canada. This was the 1950s. And as a small child, just being amazed that even in Canada, when the radio station ended the broadcast day, they would play America. Yeah. Those lyrics, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty," might possibly in a Canadian's mind have had something to do with God Save the Queen. But this past week, as I've been thinking about kings and queens, I've been thinking about how that plays out around the world. I've done a little bit of research. And did you know that of the 193 nations on earth, just about a quarter of them, 54, have a monarch? And 16 of those recognize the British monarch as their head of state. Well, their figurehead of state. Others, though, have monarchs who hold real power. In Swaziland, for example, King Mswati III rules as an absolute monarch. His word, quite literally, is law. Now, a few years ago, I was talking with a couple of our missionaries, Dan and Sandy Owen, who were working in Swaziland. And they were telling me how at the time, the king was one of the biggest impediments to dealing with the crisis of HIV/AIDS. In Swaziland, just in case you're curious, about a quarter of the population is infected. But the king doesn't want to talk about it. He wants to insist on the traditional ways of doing things, ways which have not helped. Sometimes instead of being a source of cultural joy, a monarch can be dangerous. Today, we celebrate a different kind of king. We celebrate Christ the King Sunday, or Reign of Christ Sunday. A celebration that goes back to 1925. It's, in fact, the newest celebration of the Christian church. And it's a time that we stop to mark our allegiance to Jesus Christ, and not to any earthly political power. Back in 1925, when this was first celebrated, Europe was in a rough place. The First World War was over, but all of the power dynamics were shifting. It was clear that things were not going well. And so in those dark days between the world wars, the church decided it was time to look to another ruler, to remind the people that no matter what happened on the political stage, Christ was king. In today's reading from John's Gospel, we find the story that we usually read on Good Friday. That piece of the story that takes Jesus from arrest to crucifixion. That encounter with Pilate. We find it to be a troubling story. As he's accused of being a rebel, as he's accused of claiming for himself political authority. But Jesus rejects that. He understood the threat that was posed to him by that simple question. Are you king of the Jews? There was only one king of the Jews, and his name was Herod, the son of the Herod in the Christmas story. And for Jesus to claim that he was the king would have been nothing less than treason. It would have been undermining the monarchy of Israel. It would have been undermining the authority of Rome. And so as Pilate asked that question, Jesus was silent. Are you the king of the Jews? Pilate asked again. And Jesus doesn't answer yes. And he doesn't answer no. He doesn't mention kings at all, but only a kingdom. A kingdom that he says is nothing like anything that Pilate has ever known. Yes, okay, says Pilate, but are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus points out again that the only one talking about kings is him. You say that I'm a king. It's you that's stuck on this idea, not me. And that's why this is such an odd festival of the church. Christ the King. We celebrate the guy who refused to claim for himself that title. We celebrate the one who absolutely declined to be king. Instead, Jesus sidestepped it entirely. And he did that because he understood that Pilate was not interested in establishing an eternal truth about Jesus' status, about his nature. What Pilate wanted to know was whether this was a man he should worry about. Does he have a following? Are they armed? Where does Jesus fall in the political pecking order? Pilate's question has to do with holiness. It has nothing to do with righteousness. It's just a matter of power. The power that he might wield. The trouble he might cause. Of course, as we celebrate today, we stand on the cusp of the year. On this last Sunday of the old year, getting ready to begin the new church year with the first Sunday of Advent next week. And we celebrate that Jesus is a king. But not the kind of king the world expects. Not only does Jesus not claim power, but instead he's the kind of king who rules in our lives with just a whisper of spirit. It's not the kind of kingdom that rules by force, but rather by love. We've seen over the centuries those who would try and make religion a force ruled by power. We've seen it in other religions, we've seen it in our own. Yet the good news today is that we're set free from that. That we're called to be followers of a God who came in humility, in service, and in love. Without any pomp, without swords or guns, but instead a God who came into the earth as a baby to dwell among us. Next week, the journey begins. The journey of waiting, of watching. The journey of hope and peace and joy and love. That's our journey, isn't it? A journey of trust, of peace, of patience. That's your journey as a church. As you take the next steps, moving on from Pastor Mary's time with you to the eventual arrival of another pastor who will carry on that same holy work, journeying with you in this place, helping you with those little tasks of running a church, baptizing babies, confirming children, performing weddings, remembering people's lives at funerals. Those simple, humble acts of love. My prayer for you, people of God, is that as you wait, as you watch, as you pray, as you prepare, you would open yourselves to the presence of God's Spirit. Not a presence that's far away that needs to come to you, but a presence that is already there. Know that you are beloved. Know that you are accompanied. Know that you are never alone. For Christ the King is with you. Your sisters and brothers from the United Church of Christ stand with you. We journey together into a new year and into new promises. Thanks be to God for such a wondrous gift.